All right, we got lots of time to talk football this week, and we'll certainly be all over football this week as Pitt's in an off week before they take on Notre Dame next week. So lots of time to talk about that. But in the meantime, Pitt basketball got started last night, and this is one of those. I don't think we'll always tape a Morning Pitt after a basketball game, particularly a home game. When we're a little bit late getting back from the arena, but Jim covered the game at the Petersen Events Center last night, so I watched that one from the home offices of Panther-Lair.com. We get a little Morning Pitt here. After all, it was the season opener, so I figure we should take a little bit of time to talk about it. Pitt, of course, beat Youngstown State 74-59. The Panthers won, and the Panthers covered, as I predicted they would do. I think I predicted 76-61. I think Jim predicted 75-60. So I intentionally went 1 point higher than them for both teams. So Jim's a little bit closer at the 75-60 on the 74-59 game, but I was 76-61. Still feeling pretty good about it. It was a game that Pitt did not exactly dominate. They were up 6 at halftime. They trailed for most of the first half. They didn't actually take their first lead until the 3:07 mark of the first half. They went up by 2. They eventually, they went into halftime up 6. The game was still a 4-point game with 10 minutes left to play in the second half before Pitt truly pulled away. And I think a lot of people probably, certainly during that game and perhaps after it as well, came out feeling not that much better about the Panthers' chances this season than maybe they felt about them going into the first game of the regular season. I think we've all got our concerns about these teams. Some of them were kind of borne out last night. Some of them, I don't know if any were really addressed or eased with last night's game. But what we did see was Cam Corrin put up a double-double for just the third time since he's been at Pitt. We saw Papa Amadou Conti get into double-figure rebounds. We saw Brandon Cummings and Noyes Andrusaitis both get into double-figure scoring. And I think there were some, if we didn't necessarily come out of last night's game with reasons for optimism about this team, I think we came out of the last night's game at least with a new thought, or at least I had a few new thoughts or different thoughts about what they'll need to do to try to win this year, how they can possibly win games this year, the kinds of things they're going to need to do to pile up or stack as many wins as they can get. And it might be difficult to come by. Wins are going to be a challenge this year for this team. But there are probably ways that they can get a few wins out there, and I think we saw some of that last night. So what do we see in the first regular season game? The exhibition season is over. The first regular season game for the Pitt basketball team last night. What do we see? What do we learn? Where are we concerned? Where are we encouraged? Let's talk about it all here on the Tuesday edition of the Morning Pitt. YouTube.com/Panther-Lair.com. Yeah, I know we still have the football photos over there, but I like those photos from Stanford. I like Pitt's road uniforms. I like seeing them and looking at them. And obviously, even though we're talking about basketball today, we're going to keep that photo slideshow up there from football. Partially, I just didn't get a chance to edit photos and put them into a slideshow from last night's game before we sat down to record this. I kind of scribbled a bunch of notes on my 2 legal pads. I got 2 legal pads here, one with the play-by-play and one with my general notes to think about things. And I got a few things I want to mention that I wrote down there. But yeah, I spent most of my time after the game writing down, jotting down notes and doing that kind of thing. So I didn't get a chance to update the slideshow or anything like that. But we'll get around to it. We'll get some basketball photos in there. It doesn't really matter. I'm not sure if you really stare at the screen the whole time anyway, or open this in one browser tab and go to other browser tabs while it plays and listens to it. That's probably what I would do. Not necessarily stare at this mug all day. But anyway, Pitt wins last night. They win by 15. They cover. Obviously, Cam Corrin with the double-double, one of the standout performances, 23 points, 12 rebounds, 8 of 11 from the floor. He made a three-pointer. He was 6 of 7 from the free throw line. Brandon Cummings chipped in 18 points. He scored 8 of those from the line. Papa Amadou Conti had a career-high 10 rebounds. I had to look this up. Papa Amadou Conti's previous career high in rebounds was 4. He had 10 last night. He also played 22 minutes, which is a lot of minutes, and this is something we're going to talk about here in a second. And then Noyes Andrusaitis, the other big scorer for Pitt, with 13 points, 4 of 7 shooting from the floor, 3 of 5 from 3. And a lot of things I think that you like in Noyes Indrusaitis' game. I want to bring up the full stat line. So Noyes Indrusaitis had 13 points, 4 rebounds, 2 assists, 2 steals, and he had 3 turnovers. But Pitt was a plus 23 with Noyes Indrusaitis on the court. Noyes played 31 minutes. The transfer from Iowa State, a plus 23, the best plus minus of anyone on the team. Papa Amadou Conti was a plus 17, Cam Corrin a plus 16, DeMarco Minor a plus 10, and Brandon Cummings Minor was a plus 12, Brandon Cummings was a plus 10. But Noyes Indrusaitis, and I'm just mentioning him here off the bat because we had our basketball preview content on Panther-Lair.com yesterday, went through a bunch of different questions, predicting the record, predicting, a bold prediction, and top freshman, top transfer, top this, top that, top leading scorer, which might have been the toughest one to predict of all. But I went with Noyes Indrusaitis as the impact transfer because I felt like DeMarco Minor would be the obvious option as the starting point guard. And there's just something about Noyes Indrusaitis that I was like, you know what? I'll go with him. I think he'll make an impact because he impressed me in the 2 exhibition games, the Providence game and the UPJ game. Not necessarily with what he did because, Providence was a bigger challenge than UPJ. He made plays against both teams, but it was really about the way he kind of approached it on the court, the energy he played with, the aggressiveness he played with, and the sort of urgency that he played with. And I think that's an important quality for this team. And if there was one big picture takeaway from last night's game, from the Youngstown State game, it's that this team is really going to have to be, what's the best word for it? Like, they're going to have to play with more energy than every opponent they face. They're going to have to outwork every opponent they face. They're going to have to be a bigger pest to every opponent they face. Like, they are going to, I actually at one point during the game last night sort of envisioned a Pitt script logo, but instead of saying Pitt, it said Pest, because that's what they're going to need to be. I just don't think they're talented enough that they're going to win a lot of games on talent. And you can look at last night's game, the Youngstown State game, and we'll get into some of the things that I think they changed and did to help secure that game, but it was something of an out-talenting type of win, but it was also, some changes that they made in how they were, particularly how they were defending Youngstown State, but also kind of how they approached it overall that I think made the difference. But in a lot of games, certainly most ACC games, and probably a decent number of non-conference games, they're not going to be able to win on talent alone. Now, there's some element of this that, this applies to every basketball game. You know what I mean? This applies to every game. Like, few teams are so good that they can win on, the virtue of talent alone. They're going to have to outwork their opponents. They're going to have to play with more urgency. But I think for teams that have, maybe not as much talent, that other element becomes that much more important. That you defeat teams or you keep games close enough by being a pest. By just outworking the other team. And Pitt had 9 steals last night against Youngstown State. And I think that's going to have to be, maybe that should have been my bold prediction, is that Pitt leads the ACC in steals. Like, they're going to need to be the type of team that gets mad steals because they just work that hard. And that means for 31 games, playing 40 minutes of basically foot on the gas, particularly on defense, and being a major pest. It's what they're going to have to do. And when you talk about dragging teams down to the mud, I mean, we've heard the Pitt coaches talk about this the last couple of years. It's not about necessarily, when it comes to this year, it's not about slowing the game down, although that may be to their advantage offensively. I'm not sure. But it's more about just dragging them down to play, to have to deal with your style of defense. And your style of defense is going to have to be in your face, hyper aggressive, getting into the passing lanes and just making life difficult. I mean, there were 9 steals. At least half of them were cases of the Pitt player just picking the pocket of the Youngstown State player. If you listen to the broadcast with Jeff Hathorn and Nick Rivers, I mean, they talk about pulling the chair out type of steals. And I think DeMarco Minor had one of those. And that's the kind of thing they're going to have to do. And they're going to have that kind of urgency and energy on both ends of the court, really. They're going to need to have it on defense, and they're going to need to have it on offense, too. That you value every possession like your life depends on it. Now, again, this is what every team should do every possession. But I think when you have certain talent deficiencies, when you're not going to be the most talented team on the court for probably more than half your 31 games, you have to make up for that by, this is the worst cliche ever, but wanting it more than your opponent, by playing harder than your opponent, by having more urgency and more energy than your opponent. And I think when you look at like a guy like Nois Indrisitis brings that. Papa Amadou Conti brings that. Brandon Cummings last night, I mean, that dude was putting his life on the line like it was a Final Four game or something, playing against Youngstown State. Like, he brings that. I think DeMarco Minor's got some of that, but I think he also wants to be somewhat controlled as he helps run the team. I think Omari Witherspoon brings that. I think Roman Cialepa can bring that. You know what I mean? Like, that just like, I mean, that dude is, the court is a china shop for him, and he's the bull. And he will run through, over, probably not around anything that gets in his way. Like, that's what they're going to need. They're going to need that kind of energy. And I imagine this is going to be one of these like talking points that people get sick of hearing me say, but I think this is going to be the case for this team, that they're going to have to play like that night in, night out on both ends of the court. And it applies to rebounding. It applies to how you run the offense. It applies to how you play on defense. And last night, they didn't always do it, but I think they did it enough, and they particularly did it a lot in the second half. And they did it when they had certain guys on the court. Like, I don't think it's a coincidence. As I talk about those guys who are, when I named those players that were playing with a certain level of energy, I don't think it's a coincidence that that Pitt was plus 23 with Nois Indrisitis on the court. I don't think it's a coincidence that Pitt was plus 10 with Brandon Cummings on the court. I don't think it's a coincidence that Pitt was plus 17 with Papa Amadou Conti on the court. Now, Papa Amadou Conti is an interesting case because of what we saw the Pitt coaches do last night, which is, I think they were they felt, and maybe rightfully so, that they were getting killed in the paint a little bit, particularly in the first half. See if I can find the first half, second half stats. I meant to look these up. I wanted to find the points in the paint. Looks like Youngstown State had 14 points in the paint in the first half. They scored 28 points. So half of them came in the paint. And I think Pitt wanted to, they still got another 10 points in the paint in the second half. But I think Pitt wanted to corral that. And so they went to that double center lineup, which they actually used by my math for 16 minutes and 7 seconds last night, with Cam Corrin and Papa Amadou Conti on the court together. They used it for the final 5:31 of the first half. They used it for the first 4:05 of the second half. And then they used it for a 6.5 minute stretch later in the second half. That 5.5 minute stretch at the end of the first half, Pitt outscored Youngstown State 12-3. Youngstown State made one basket. They shot 1 of 7 from the floor and 1 of 3 from 3. Excuse me. They made 1 3-pointer. In that stretch. The next stretch, when they had the two centers on the court, the 4-minute stretch to open the second half, it was an even matchup. It was 5-5, the scoring. And then that final stretch, it was 6.5 minutes with Conti and Corrin on the court together. Pitt outscored Youngstown State 15-7. So all combined, you have a why wouldn't I write that down? Write down the scoring 32-15. Pitt outscored Youngstown State 32-15 with Papa Amadou Conti and Cam Corrin on the court together. Just as relevant, if not more so, they out-rebounded Youngstown State 21-9 with those two guys on the court together. Now, in the game, Pitt had a huge rebounding advantage, 46-24. So, the rest of the game, when they didn't have those two centers together, they still had a 25-15. They were still plus 10 on the boards. However, in the second half, I think this is where it gets interesting. When they used those two guys a lot together, they were 13. They were plus 6 in rebounds in the second half with Conti and Corrin on the court together, 13-7. Without those guys together, the other minutes in the second half, It was a 1 rebound advantage. It was 7-6. And so my thought, and I haven't checked out Jeff Capel's post-game press conference yet. I'll have to look at that this morning and see if he says completely different. But my thought is that Pitt felt like they were getting beat in the paint, and they needed to do better job rebounding. So they put 2 centers out there, and they got it. Papa Amadou Kanté had 10 rebounds. 8 of those 10 came when he was on the court with Cam Corrin. Cam Corrin had 12 rebounds. 6 of those 12 came when he was on the court with Papa Amadou Kanté. It was an adjustment. It's not something I thought we would see very often. I thought we'd see it a little bit here and there, maybe not even every game, and certainly not for 16 minutes in a game. But in this game, it became something that Pitt had to do. And, you know, if there was one biggest effect, probably, you know, other than the rebounding, it's that it sort of forced Youngstown State to just shoot threes all the time. At the 8-minute mark of the second half, so 12 minutes into the second half, only 8 minutes left to play, Youngstown State had attempted 16 field goals, and only 3 of those were inside the arc. They were shooting everything from outside. They made 5 of 13 to that point, and it was keeping them in the game, and it was even though it was a 10-point game by then. But Youngstown State was not getting much inside at all, and they weren't even trying inside. Now, they finished... I think they attempted 9 shots inside the arc in the second half, 9 2-point shots, and they made 5 of them. So, you know, good shooting percentage, better than 50% shooting percentage, but they only attempted 9 shots from 2 in the second half. And I think a lot of it was that they were dealing with having 2 centers on the court. I have been one of the biggest doubters of the 2-center alignment, one who never thought that it could or should happen. I even wondered, you know, even when they were going to have Deshaun Jackson, if they would do it all that much or if they should do it all that much. Well, you know, chalk one up for Capel for last night, because going with the 2 centers, I think, probably made the difference in this game. I don't know if you're going to be able to do that every night. I don't know if you're going to be able to do that every game. I don't know if you're going to be able to do that once you get into ACC play. But to beat Youngstown State last night, they were able to do it, and it worked. It worked to the tune of a 15-point win. It worked to the tune of Cam Corrin getting a double-double, and Papa Amadou Kanté coming up with 10 rebounds and 4 points. Now, can you play Cam Corrin 35 minutes every night? That seems unlikely to me. You know, Jeff Capel made a point that last year Cam Corrin was playing more minutes than he ever had, and that, you know, probably adversely affected his performance as time went on. Now here you are in the season opener, and Cam Corrin's playing 35 minutes. You probably want to manage those minutes a little bit better. You probably would like to win some of these non-conference games against teams outside the power conferences by playing 1 center at a time, by going with Roman Cialepa or Barry Denning Jr. or whoever you might want to go with at the 4, Omari Witherspoon. It doesn't matter. If you have to resort to using both centers, I don't think that's a good thing, even if it's an effective strategy, as it was last night. But we'll see how that plays out. Otherwise, as you look through the lineup, you know, I mentioned, you know, the 3 guys who scored in double figures: Corrin, Cummings, and Indricitis. DeMarco Minor had 8.6 rebounds and 3 assists. Pretty solid stat line for him. He was also 4 of 4 from the free throw line. Roman Cialepa scored a couple nice baskets, although he was also 2 of 7 from the floor, so he wasn't all that effective shooting. Makari Moore just played a handful of minutes, missed his 1 shot attempt, and took a foul. Barry Dunning Jr. played 8 minutes, had 2 points on 0 of 3 shooting. Both of his points came from the free throw line. And that's sort of a continuation of what we saw in the exhibition game of Barry Dunning Jr. just not making an impact yet. Maybe he needs to get settled in. Maybe he needs to find his role and find his place, but he's just not making an impact. One last thought, and I'm almost mentioning this here just to remind myself to think about it as time goes on. Nick Rivers had a quote, I think it was in the first half. It might have been in the second half last night. Former Pitt player Nick Rivers doing the color commentary. He says, getting to the free throw line is a big part of Pitt's offense. And I remember hearing that last night and just thinking like, God, he's probably right. I don't even think that's damning with faint praise, because I don't even think there's anything praiseworthy about it. If getting to the free throw line is a big part of a team's offense, I don't think it should be a big part of the team's offense, but last night Pitt had 22 points from the free throw line. Almost little less than a third of their total points came from the free throw line. They shot 27 free throws. And now I think there is some element of that ties into the energy, that if you bring more energy than the opponent, they're going to end up being forced to foul you, and that's going to work to your advantage and send you to the line. But it really sort of makes it feel like you're just not going to be all that effective at running your offensive sets. You're probably not going to be all that great at shooting. So your big part of your offense is getting to the free throw line. Sadly, I think he's right. But Brandon Cummings, 11 shots from the free throw line, 8 of 11 from the line. Cam Corrin, 6 of 7. DeMarco Minor, 4 of 4, including 2 technical foul free throws. So that's probably a line and a quote and a sentiment that's going to live in the back of my head throughout this season. And we'll see. Maybe it'll be one of those stats where we look at it and we're like, what's Pitt's record when they attempt 15 or more free throws or something like that? We'll probably track that throughout the season. But either way, Pitt's 1-0. They get off to the 74-59 win over Youngstown State to open the season, and they'll face Longwood on Friday. Should be another win, and we'll see what develops out of that one, what we learn from that game. So thanks for tuning in today. Make sure you like this video and subscribe. We still that subscriber count keeps rolling. Let's push it. Let's shoot for 6,000 or at least 5,100 or something. We'll see. But anyway, thanks for watching today. Hope you had a good Monday, good start to the week. Enjoy your Tuesday, and we'll catch up with you tomorrow on the Morning Pit right here on youtube.com/Panther-Lair.com.